Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is the first part of a two-part lecture which explains how we need to rebuild the social sciences on Islamic foundations to improve the educational systems in the Islamic world. It's essential to understand that the real battleground is knowledge, not guns, bombs, and armies. The pre-Islamic era was the age of ignorance, and the first wahi to our Prophet said that read in the name of thy Lord who created, who taught human beings what they did not know. And God gave mankind a special kind of knowledge which enlightened the world for more than 1,000 years. What was this knowledge that transformed the world? Allah Ta'ala mentions many times that the message of Allah is complete and perfect for guidance for mankind for all time to come. Instead of thinking about what the knowledge was, we can think about what it did. And so we see that it took ignorant and backward Bedouin at the bottom rank of world civilization, and they became leaders of the world. And they created a brilliant civilization which enlightened the world for 1,000 years. Now, what does our university education teach us? All our courses are based on knowledge created by the West. Little or no overlap between our education and the Quran. So the natural conclusion for anyone who gets a Western education is that the knowledge of the Quran is useless for our modern lives. This conclusion is unacceptable for Muslims, but then what is the solution? What happened to the power of the revolutionary knowledge given to Muslims directly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So we get two dramatically different claims. One is that God's complete and perfect message brought mankind out of darkness, ignorance 1400 years ago, and this knowledge created a civilization which enlightened the world for 1,000 years. But the West has a different claim. They say that mankind was in darkness and ignorance until the sun of reason rose in Europe 5 centuries ago, ending the dark ages of Europe. And after that, Europeans made spectacular advances and created an advanced civilization, conquered the world, and they continue to dominate the world in wealth and power due to the tremendous amount of knowledge that they have created. So how can we reconcile these conflicting claims? The European solution is that knowledge of Islam was great for its own time, but it is now obsolete. Today, if anyone wants to progress, you have to follow the path of the Europeans. But if we have faith in Islam, then Quran is complete and perfect. It can never become obsolete. So it leads to a conflict between the head and the heart. Our intellect, our eyes show us the power of European knowledge, but our heart tells us of the power of the message of Allah. So how can we resolve this conflict? This requires relearning history. The history that we have learned has been created by Europeans, and it has been created to maximize the importance of the West. It glorifies the achievements of the West and reduces to zero contributions of all other civilizations. So why does history matter? Basically, it's because the victors get to write the history, and therefore it glorifies their achievements and diminishes and belittles the losers. And so this history always creates a superiority complex in the victors and an inferiority complex in the losers. And the greatest problem facing the Ummah today is this inferiority complex. A popular journalist in Pakistan, Hassan Nassar, he says that our culture is completely rotten. We don't even know shame for the absolutely terrible things that we do. We are 1,000 times worse than all others. We do every corruption under the sun, while the West has no concept of these things. Lying is out of bounds for them. They are honest, they have integrity. So we are opposites. Now the truth is that Hassan Nassar doesn't know anything about the West. He has a glorified image of them and their culture. But the question is, where did he get this idea?
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it? I think this is a very hard choice.
So
But
the Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, thinks that it is worth killing 500,000 children to achieve political goals. Is this a superior civilization? So how did Hassan Nassar get these ideas that we are the most inferior people on the planet? So to understand this, we need to understand how ideas are formed and shaped. This is called meta level thinking, thinking about thinking. And this is essential if we are to be intellectuals, to learn how this world works. Why do I have the thoughts that I have? What are the forces which shaped my thinking? Today, if we want to learn how we think, we must study European history. Why? Because Europeans have ruled 90% of the globe, and since they colonized us, we have been taught the stories which they have told us. World War One and Two sapped the power of Europe and led to the success of freedom movements. But today, even in the free countries, the Western education creates the same colonization of minds. That is, we still learn to think like Europeans and learn that they are superior and we are inferior. And so, because this way of thinking uh, has been learned by us via Western education, so to undo its effects, we must learn how Europeans learned to think like this. So today, our education teaches us Western thought, philosophy, and science, and we learn how to think like the Europeans, and we learn what their thoughts are, what their justification is, and how we can have those thoughts. But meta level thinking, independent thinking, requires moving outside of these boxes. And we must learn how history shaped European thought, which is being taught to us. So, to do this, we need to go to European history. And European starts with, from our point of view, uh, yeah, Emperor Constantine imposed one version of Christianity on the Roman Empire. At the Council of Nicaea, one of the factions, which was the Trinitarian, forged documents and lied to get their version of Christianity accepted. The Arian heresy, which denied the Godhead of Christ, was rejected and suppressed. And all thought other than Orthodox Christian thought was rejected. Libraries which contained non-Christian thoughts were burned. And basically, that is what led the Dark Ages of Europe, because all knowledge other than the Orthodox doctrine was suppressed. Sayyid Abul Hassan Ali Nadwi has written this great book about the rise of Islam, which shows how all of the civilizations on the planet at that time were in decline and ignorance when the light of Islam came to the deserts of Arabia. And basically, what do we mean by darkness and ignorance is the law of the jungle. The powerful can do whatever they want, they have the right to do so, and the wealthy can do whatever they want with their wealth. And the poor and powerless have no rights at all. The miracle of Islam was to create new ideas that all human beings are equal. Power is given to the powerful to enable them to help the weak, and wealth is given to the wealthy to help to allow them to help the poor. And the strange and the current Bible contains a prophecy that the Spirit of Truth, that is our Prophet Muhammad, when he comes, he will guide you into all the truth. And what he has to say, you cannot bear to hear that. That shows the powerful knowledge that was given in the teachings of Islam to our Prophet and from him to the Ummah. The rise of Islam led to the creation of a civilization of Islamic Spain, Al-Andalus, in which 7 centuries of astonishing progress was made in all branches of knowledge, compared to the recent 3 centuries of European progress. Ibn Khaldun mentioned a law of history that as civilizations become advanced, they start indulging in luxuries and are overcome by young and energetic barbarians. This happens in the Islamic Al-Andalus when the European barbarians reconquered Spain. Now they started translating the books of the Muslims, and this ended the dark ages of Europe. However, the real reason for the European Renaissance has been hidden in books of history. Here is a list of causes of the Renaissance, which mentions different factors, but none of these factors have any direct reference to Islam or Arabs. They're all indirect, and basically they conceal the contribution of the Muslims to the enlightenment of Europe. The contributions of the Muslims have been wiped out by the Greek strategy. And this involves saying that, okay, whenever you borrow from Muslims, move it back to Aristotle and the Greek philosophers, or move it forward to European powers. And this has created the impression that there was an infinitely wise set of Greek scholars who discussed every problem under the sun, because everything that was created by the Muslim civilization was moved back to the Greeks. So Schumpeter says that there's a 500 gap in economic thought. First the Greeks thought about economics, and then the Europeans. In the middle, for 500 years, mankind stopped having economic thoughts. In fact, Adorno borrowed from the Persian schools of thought, and Copernicus plagiarized from Untitled Chapter. The impact of this fabricated history has very bad on Muslim youth, because they feel that our ancestors never did anything worthwhile, so how can we achieve anything? In fact, there are great names, too many to mention. Ibn al-Haytham was the inventor of the scientific method and the father of optics, but in most articles on optics, you won't find his name mentioned. The medical textbooks of Ibn Sina were taught in Europe for 3 centuries. And Newton said that I have been able to see so far because I have stood on the shoulder of giants. But very few people know that these giants were from the Islamic tradition. There's a book called Theft of History by Jack Goody, which explains how Europeans borrowed inventions of other civilizations and claimed them for their own. Going back to the factors which shaped European thought, one of the essential elements is the Trinity. We already mentioned how supporting the Trinity required fabrication, and so the ability to lie for the sake of truth. But for our purposes, the most important development was the axiomatic method, which says that there is a collection of axioms which are outside the reach of discussion, debate, question. So this we take to be the absolute truth, and we will never discuss them or question them. And this methodology is used in economics, where the theory of human behavior is built on absurd assumptions, and all of modern economics is built on these absurd assumptions. But these assumptions are outside the scope of discussion. So the Islamic knowledge, as it entered Europe, led to a battle between science and religion, where science was just the name of Islamic philosophies. This knowledge was often in conflict with Catholic doctrines. Catholics tried to resist. The Spanish Inquisition burnt people with heretical doctrines. But ultimately they could not resist. And so the church split into two. And the science that Europeans have is all borrowed from the Muslims, but this fact has been suppressed in European history, and it has been made out that Europeans are unique inventors of science. And in fact, Max Weber, a very important and respected scholar, says that Europeans are uniquely capable of science, and all other civilizations are inferior because they cannot create science. And similarly, Immanuel Kant says that rational men are worthy of respect, and only Europeans are rational because they invented science. So the fact that the science originated in the Islamic civilization is actually an attack on one of the pillars of Western thought. So this influx of new knowledge led to the breakup of the church and a century of religious wars, which led to massive death and destruction. And this, in turn, discredited religion because religion led to wars. And so both the general public and the intellectuals realized that one could not construct a society on the basis of Christian teachings, and therefore you needed to build a new theory of society. So the loss of faith in Christianity was a pretty traumatic experience because for centuries something that everybody had believed in to be 100% true turned out to be false. So European intellectuals faced the task of how to rebuild the entire stock of knowledge starting from zero on sound foundations. So Descartes was called the father of Western philosophy. He starts by think therefore I am. Why is he trying to prove his own existence? Because he says we are starting from zero, we know nothing. So the first thing to prove then is to prove that I myself exist.